right, welcome back to another episode of the Extreme Lifestyle Living Podcast. Now, I'm not going to lie, this podcast episode may be a little bit rough. It's the first time I recorded in, I think, 3 or 4 weeks. I got a whole new setup as well. I'm using my laptop with the camera and the audio all in one little thing. So I'm a little bit stressed about it, to be honest, but it feels good to be back. I took the last few weeks off. Honestly, was super overwhelmed with life. Life got super busy. I got some side projects that are on the go that are super exciting that I'm excited to talk about once I get more get my grounding within some of these projects I got going on, and then also with the bodybuilding show. Got into peak week. The last 2-3 weeks of the show, I really just dialed in, and honestly, just trying to fucking balance absolutely everything was a lot. So I just decided to take a step back. And it's funny, today's episode topic I've literally had for 3 or 4 weeks ready to record, and I'm super excited to chat about it. I think it's super relevant for not only just myself, but a lot of my clients as well and people around me. But, I'm just super excited to be back into the routine, eating more food, feeling good. The gym's amazing. I'm not going to talk about the prep, I'm not going to talk about the bodybuilding show this episode. I'll probably do that future. But today what I want to talk about is the courage it takes to embrace change. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because all of us want to be better versions of ourselves, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. We all have this idea and this goal in our mind as to where we're going to go with our life and what this looks like. And no one really talks about the courage that it takes to accumulate the energy and the confidence and just that grit in yourself to make these changes. Like, going to the gym, signing up for a gym membership, signing up for a coach, signing up for nutrition protocols, signing up for an event like a bodybuilding show, a Spartan race, a High Rocks, or whatever it may be. Like, there's always that period where you want to do that, but you don't just think about it and do it immediately, right? It takes days, weeks, months, sometimes even years to build up that courage to admit to yourself that you're not happy with where you're at and this is where you want to go. So that courage that it takes to embrace that change, to embrace those emotions, to embrace that emotional state to yourself that you do want to change and do something different and do something you've never done before, I think is one of those things that is almost debilitating sometimes because, for the gym, right? Like the prime example, like if you look in the mirror and you're not happy with what you see, there's a big part of you that has to admit to yourself that you're not happy with how you look, you're not happy with how you feel, you're not happy with the day-to-day and week-to-week actions that align with how you look and feel. And it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I don't like myself. I don't like this. I don't like that, So the courage that it takes to embrace those emotions, to embrace that, that conversation with yourself, to have that, have that honest, integral conversation, like, I'm not happy. And then the courage it takes to embrace the change, to put in the actions, to track the nutrition, to go to the gym, to get the membership, get a coach, and figure out what it is that you need for what it is you don't understand as to what you don't have access to, right? Same with your financial goals, right? Like we all go to school, we get certificates, we get PhDs, masters, and these things to get another level of financial success in your life. Like I went to business school, started my own business, in order for me to get there, in order for you to get there, you have to embrace the change that comes with, embrace the fact that you're not happy with the financial income you're making now, embrace the fact that, you're not happy with the education you have now, and then you have to embrace all of the change and endure that commitment, the day-to-day, the week-to-week, the month-to-month, the year-to-year grind to get to this next level of life. And nobody ever talks about the courage it takes in that internal battle, you know what I mean? And a lot of people I'm talking to, I've probably run 15 to 20 calls a week, some with my community, some with other people that are just joining the community. And the biggest thing that I always try to give people realizations with is the fact that you're actually proactively trying to change, the fact you're actually proactively admitting to yourself you're not happy with certain areas of your life, and the fact that you're embracing these emotions, the turmoil, the anxiety, the depression, the self-doubts, the imposter syndrome, is incredibly difficult. And you have to give yourself credit for even trying to attempt to embrace the change. We can all talk about finances, our relationships, our boundaries, and our physical goals, and have that perspective of this is where we're not at yet. Even myself personally, like I just did this bodybuilding show, and all I'm thinking about is how much better I can get. I'm not even really reflecting on how proud I am of how well I did with the actual prep. I'm not really reflecting on all of the great abundance, positive things throughout it, right? We're always so focused on where we want to go next. And, the reason why that's so troubling for us is because the goals are always moving. You know what I mean? We don't actually get that success. We don't actually get that validation. For me personally, my very first goal in the gym was to get a bicep vein. Then it was to get abs. And then it was to maybe see if I could diet like a bodybuilding, do a bodybuilding diet. And then it was doing a show. And that was literally 10 years ago. And now I've done 5 fucking shows and run a full online coaching business, right? So the courage that it takes to embrace these changes, the courage that it takes to look at yourself in the mirror in all these different areas of your life, and really truly not be happy with it and then look at where you want to go is something that you really got to reflect on. And the reason why I said we're always looking at the future and what else we got to get done is because if we don't actually reflect on the courage it takes to embrace change, the courage that we've embodied for ourselves and put ourselves first to, wonder what this anxiety that I feel towards my life, the depression and all the symptoms in terms of where I'm not happy with my life, the self-doubts, the imposter syndrome, whatever it is that you're mentally struggling with, like all these doubts and all these like, questions as to where you want to go, the fact that you're fucking embracing those and trying to figure out what these mean, so articulate your future, to know what you want to look like physically, to know what kind of job you want that's fulfilling and rewarding, to know what kind of lifestyle you want with boundaries and energy and support around you. Like, the courage it takes to embrace the turmoil mentally, to get clarity for that, to gain control over that, and to progress your life is absolutely fucking incredibly hard to do. And 90% of people don't embrace that at all. That's why there's just so many statistics of people in their midlife crisis and 50s and 60s and like really, really struggling because for their 20s and 30s, they don't embrace this shit. They're just proactive. They're just reactively going through life and doing the stereotypical things, like they get their jobs, they buy a house, they get married, they have kids. And then you got 10-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids in a life that you've built that you can't really change, that you never even really question yourself and see if this is exactly what you want. There's so many people that live their lives already dead. And I don't want to make that sound too morbid, but they always say like like that quote says, like you die at 25, but you physically don't leave till you're 65. Most people don't embrace their emotions. Most people don't even look internally to really figure out what they need and what they want to do. And just on that simple topic of having the courage to embrace change is everything. And it's a big reflection process. So you got to be able to reflect with yourself and look at everything that you want in your life and what you don't have in your life. And then in order to see that gap, you're here right now. This is where you are, let's say physically, right? Let's say you want to lose weight, you want to gain muscle, you want to have better nutrition protocols, you want to have more day-to-day, week-to-week structure in your health and fitness. There's where you are right now, and then there's where you want to be. And that gap in terms of that growth is what takes all that courage to embrace that change. And that gap and that courage and that gap and that courage and embracing that change is the most hardest fucking part of the journey. And most people don't even realize that they're full of courage, they're full of resilience, they're full of fucking energy and power and conviction, but they just don't reflect on that simplicity behind it. I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and a lot of our conversations is like grace, self-love, protecting your boundaries, protecting your peace and all these things. And we had a conversation where it's like, that's hard to measure, that's hard to track. Like, when you're losing weight, gaining weight, something statistical, like, when it comes to physical goals, like, it's easy to look at the metrics and be like, hey, this is right, this is wrong. Same with finances, same with education. Like, you have a time in versus time out. Like, if you get a 4-year degree, you're 3 years in, you got a year left. If you want to lose 20 pounds, you last 15, you got 5 left. If you're trying to meal prep and get your macros and situate and you're tracking 4 to 5 days out of 7, you got to track the other 2 days. So there's always a progression, an area of opportunity that's very, very black or white with these things. But when we're talking about mental health, when we're talking about self-actualization, we're talking about confidence, we're talking about things that we want to be fulfilled and full of joy, how do you fucking track that? You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of people that are proactively trying to be better versions of themselves mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, is just like a step that's skipped in terms of reflecting and realizing the courage that it takes to make those changes. All we do is we wake up one day, we know we're not in the shape that we want. We wake up one day, we know we don't have as much money as we want. We wake up some days, we're like, okay, I don't have the freedom I want. We don't have the happiness, the peace, whatever it may be. And we're so quick to just look at what we need to do. And then once we look at what we need to do, we're just like, we're going to do that. And that's great. And I love that you put everything into action and then you're proactively tracking your macros, proactively going to the gym, proactively trying to change your schedule, proactively trying to, just better yourself. But that shift, that little shift to look at yourself from the perspective of growth and where you want to go, you need to understand how much courage that takes. Because you're admitting to yourself you literally don't like certain avenues of your life. And that is incredibly hard to fucking do. You're admitting to yourself that there's physical parts of your actual body that you live in every single fucking day that you're not happy with. You're literally admitting to yourself that your future isn't going to be set up for success with the day-to-day actions you're doing right now. And the fact you're willing to embrace that, look at yourself, criticize yourself, maybe judge yourself and create mental turmoil where you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed and trying to figure out what's next. That shift, that courage that it takes to embrace that shift is absolutely fucking everything. And if you can't look at yourself with a positive light and at least appreciate the efforts that you're doing, the intentions that you're doing, and the commitments you're doing each day to accumulate that success, is just a missing piece of just self-love that you just guys need to realize. Like, again, the reason why I said the mental health stuff and why it's harder to track is how do you track depression? How do you track anxiety? How do you track fulfillment? You know what I mean? How do you track these things? How do you have the confidence and reassurance and validation that you're on the right road? And if it's black or white with fitness or finances or education, it's very easy to know where you're at on that side of the fence. But if you don't reflect on your courage, you don't reflect on your confidence, you don't reflect on the actual shit that you're doing and the commitments you're doing to yourself, for that future, there's just a pocket of just energy and abundance and self-love that you're just missing out on. And that's why it's so hard for most people to stay committed to their change and can stay committed to their growth and stay committed to the life that they want, because you're not even giving yourself the time of day to be proud of yourself for trying. And it's incredibly hard because when you're in, I call it the transition abyss. Like, when you're going from point A to point B, there's always that little bit of in between. You know what I mean? If you want to lose 20 pounds, the in between is you lost 10. You want to make more money and then you want to get more education. Like, in between is when you're halfway to making the money that you want, or you're halfway done your education or your mentorship or your certificates, right? So it's very easy to look at it from a bigger picture perspective and be like, all right, I'm halfway there, I'm 30% there, I'm 80% there. But when we're talking about fulfillment, when we're talking about anxiety, depression, and confidence and self-actualization, there's no real metric of measurement. You can't wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm 30% more fulfilled today than I was last week. Or, oh, I'm 30% less depressed today than I was last month. It's harder to track those things. So the simplicity behind just recognizing the courage, just recognize your energy, recognizing your efforts, recognizing your intentions, is the hack. Because it's not about looking at your life and being like, oh fuck, like, I have so much further to go. It's about looking at it from the glass half full. So if you can reflect and at least look at yourself from the perspective of being proud of the courage, proud of what you're embracing, and proud of actually trying to change your fucking life, you're going to look at the glass as half full, and then that's going to make you look at the rest of the cup of what you got to fill up. And you're going to be proud of what you're fucking doing. Because even for me personally, like, I still struggle with depression. I still struggle with anxiety and mental health and confidence and all those different things, right? But it's like, I understand where I'm at now versus where I used to be. You know what I mean? And the reason why I can understand that so clearly is because I'm able to look at my last 5 to 10 to 15 years of my life and recognize the courage that I've had to embrace these changes, to look at myself in that mirror like, fuck, I'm depressed and I actually hate my life and how I look. To embrace my career. Like, I went to business school, I got an education, I had a good job, and I still wasn't fucking happy. You know what I mean? For me to look at myself in the mirror and have the courage to embrace that that's not what I want. And then even a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in my lifestyle, like, I'm doing a lot of things that most people don't ever do. And that's not an arrogancy thing. It's like, I just lost a lot of people along the way because my idea of life as to how I want to live it is just way higher than most people. A lot of people, and it's not to shit on people, but a lot of people are happy getting married, having kids, buying their house, and living their life on autopilot for like 15 to 20 years. And the amount of courage it takes to embrace removing yourself from that social norm and living a life that's more aligned with you, more abundant and more fulfilling and rewarding, it's a lot of turmoil because a lot of people don't understand that. So you got to, again, double down on your own self-confidence and reassurance to the fact that you are embracing change that many people don't understand. And when I look back at the last few years, especially after this bodybuilding show, like, prime example, the bodybuilding show, not to talk about it because I really don't want to, I wasn't really happy with the outcome. Super disappointed. It really fucked up my mental because I was really just letting it kind of eat me alive and I was trying to understand it. But what I realized is I was just being too emotional in that time. And when I took a step back and looked at the bigger picture and realized the courage that I had 10 years ago to admit to myself that I didn't like myself and how I looked, look where I'm at 10 years ago. Or 10 years after that. Do you know what I mean? And it took a lot of courage for me to sit there and say, I don't like the way I look. Don't like the way that I feel. Don't like the way that I'm living my life. And after 10 years and me progressing my life and getting my life to the absolute best fucking position of ever, like, I'm literally the happiest I've ever been, the most fulfilled I've ever been, the most clear I've ever been. And all of those things still doesn't take away all the turmoil, the self-confidence issues and all these things. But when I can rely on my own efforts, when I can rely on my own intentions and rely on my own journey and the courage that I've developed for myself to embrace these changes, that's the hack, that's the anchor, that's the foundation, that's what keeps me going forward. Because again, when it comes to certain physical tangible goals, it's easy to measure them and be like, oh, this is where I'm at. 10 pounds down, I want to lose 20, I got 10 more to go. I want to make $100,000, I made 80, I got 20,000 more to go. I want education, I want my master's, I already got my undergrad, I got 3 or 4 more years to go. Like, it's easy to look at life from that perspective, but if you can't look at the details within that and talk about the courage it embraces to lose the first 10 pounds, the courage that the courage it takes to embrace to get your undergrad, the courage it embraces to make $80,000, even the fact you're looking at 20,000 you still need. Like, if you can't look at it from that perspective, you're always just going to be chasing the next thing. And you got to give yourself some fucking credit for what it actually takes to admit to yourself. That's why I'm really highlighting and emphasizing the word courage, because it takes a lot of courage to admit to yourself and admit to everyone around you that you literally aren't happy with where you're at and you're embracing that change. And that's honestly all I really have, because it's like, I don't really know how else to really articulate that before I just go on rants and things like this. But, if you are proactively trying to be your better version of yourself, and each day you're putting in intentions, you're putting in efforts, and you're actually fucking trying, that is everything. Some days you're going to win, some days you're going to lose, some days you're going to get progress a lot, some days you're going to feel like you're moving backwards. But nonetheless, that doesn't change the fact that you're still on a continuous journey moving upwards. You're still growing, you're still grinding, you're still getting fulfillment, you're still getting a lot more out of these things than you realize. But it's that subtle shift of embracing and realizing your courage that is taking to make these changes that gives you that extra pep in your step, that gives you that extra bit of confidence, that extra bit of reassurance that you are on the right road. And I just feel like a lot of people just don't give themselves that fucking credit. And I feel like for me, the first 2 to 3 years of building my life in this regard, I didn't give myself any of that credit. Last 2, 3 years, I've been giving myself a lot of that credit, and last 6 months to 8 months, particularly since I moved back from Mexico, I've really realized how much courage I had, and that literally made me have so much more self-confidence, so much more self-reassurance, and so much more self-love, because I've realized like all of my actions, all of my intentions, all of my efforts last 5 to 10 years are working. Is there areas in my life, on all areas like fitness, finances, spirituality, like boundaries and stuff that I still want to progress on and change? Of course. I'm a hungry and ambitious person. The goals are always going to be moving forward, because as I continue to prove to myself how much I'm capable of, I'm going to want more. But if we're always chasing more and just trying to prove to ourselves that we're capable of doing things without actually reflecting and embracing, what it's taking to get there, what's the point of anything? You know what I mean? That's why when it comes to fitness, most people see their goals, let's say you want to lose 20 pounds, 50 pounds, or get in shape, whatever it is. They get their goals and then they lose them all because they don't have no substance or purpose behind what they're doing behind that. It's very transactional. That's why a lot of people go to school, they get their jobs, they get their education, and then they're depressed because there's no real reflection process as to giving themselves credit for what they've done. And it's not about becoming an arrogant, egotistical fucking prick and putting yourself on this pedestal saying you're better than everybody, but it's about looking at yourself in the mirror and just being proud. Because again, effort and energy and intentions are what the backbone is for changing your life. Prime example with the gym, you got to put effort and intentions into the gym. You're not going to see success overnight. You're not going to see success over a week, but after you do it for a couple weeks, a couple months, and a couple years, you will get that success. Same with your education. You're not going to get educated overnight, but if you continue to show up every day, each week, and for a few months and a couple of years, you're eventually going to be that educated version of yourself that you want. Same with finances. They say you put $20 a week away or $50 a week away, or whatever it is your savings plans is, or whatever your financial goals are. Like, you're not going to become a millionaire or retired overnight, but every day with the intentions and effort that compound each week, compound each month, compound each year, then you're starting to see the success. And all of those energies, all of those efforts, all of those intentions, all of those little bits of micro decisions you make that align with the bigger picture, you just have to give yourself credit for it, because it takes an immense amount of fucking courage to do all these things, because you're doing things with the hope that things work out. We've all tracked macros and went to the gym and stuck to it, and like we're praying this works out. Same with when you go to school, you're praying you get a job that financially suits you. Same with relationships and working on boundaries and wanting to be a better person. You're praying that you get access to these things. So until you actually get to the life that you want, you have to be able to recognize the work that you're doing now to build that life up. Because in order to have what you want, truthfully, you got to be able to put yourself on that pedestal and reflect that. Because any goal that you achieve in life without your own self-reflection and being proud of yourself is empty goals. That's why most people get in the best shape of their lives and they become depressed. That's why most people make a shit ton of fucking money and get a crazy good career and they're depressed. That's why most people end up buying these things that make them think they're validated, like a house, a wife, a kid, all these different things, a dog, the white picket fence, and then they have midlife crisis. They have a midlife crisis in 10, 15 years because they're never really truthfully reflecting on who they are through that process. It's always the next goal, the next checkbox, the next milestone, the next accolade, right? And if you are not reflecting on that courage that it takes to embrace all these changes, you're missing out you're missing out on so much self-love and self-actualization that it's insane. So that's honestly all I got. I could just keep ranting on it all, but you guys really just got to make sure you're giving yourself fucking credit if you are proactively trying to be the best versions of yourselves, because there's a lot of fucking energy in that. There's a lot of growth, there's a lot of self-love, there's a lot of self-actualization, there's a lot of confidence, a lot of reassurance, a lot of self-validation, and there's going to be a point in your life where you start to progress so far ahead of than you've ever thought. You're going to be in the best shape of your life. You're going to make more money than you've ever thought. You're going to be more fulfilled with your career. You're going to have boundaries and relationships around you that support you and are uplifting. But you're never going to actually be able to see them in your fucking face if you don't appreciate what you're already doing to get to that position of your life. So if there's anything you take away from this episode, make sure you look at yourself in the mirror and are incredibly fucking proud of yourself for having the courage to embrace what you didn't like and having the courage to embrace to get over that and build on that, and make sure you look in the mirror happy. Make sure you have a job that's more fulfilling. Make sure you have relationships that are around you that are more fulfilling. And it's just one of those things that you got to internally reflect on. You know what I mean? So I really hope you guys got some takeaways from that. And I do feel like this episode is a little bit, not say choppy, but again, first one back after 3 or 4 weeks. I'm a little bit all over the place, but it feels good to be back in the office, kind of doing my thing. It's really, really fun, and I'm really excited to just take this next chapter in my life after the show and just, again, continue to reflect on my own courage that has taken to embrace the changes that I've had and everything in that regard. And I hope you guys get some takeaways from that too, because you deserve to be fulfilled, you deserve to be fired up, and you deserve to look at yourself in the mirror and just know that you're the fucking shit. Why not? Your life is your life for you, and you got to live it for you unapologetically. And if you're not giving yourself the time of day to reflect and be proud of the energy you're putting in for yourself every day, you're wasting your fucking time. Period. But other than that, I appreciate you guys all. I hope you guys have a beautiful fucking week, and it's just good to be back, So let's keep leading from the front. Let's keep setting those fucking standards, and let's fucking go.